On July 25, 1945, after years of the devastating Second World War, the U.S. government made a decision that would end the war and change the fate of humanity forever. The use of the atomic bomb. Harry S. Truman, the new U.S. president, received the final release for the discard of this mass destruction weapon, which should now also end the war in the Pacific. This was of course not an easy decision, but it should prevent the death of millions of other soldiers and civilians from his point of view, and the Japanese were so weak and surprised that they would capitulate immediately. And so the exact plans for the discard immediately began, and a heated debate broke out about which cities to exterminate. In the end, it was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But why were these two relatively insignificant cities selected? Why wasn't it the Japanese capital Tokyo, and why should other cities actually be bombed? The cruel decision that was made about the death and misery of hundreds of thousands of people, we will look at today in detail. First of all, we have to jump into the year 1941, more precisely to the 7th of December of this year, because on the early morning there was supposed to be an event that would change the fate of the war and the course of history forever. The Japanese attacked the most important base of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in a surprise attack, Pearl Harbor. The attack led to the sinking or damage of 19 U.S. warships, including 8 battleships. About 2,400 Americans were killed and over 1,000 injured, and also significant amounts of aircraft and military equipment were destroyed or completely damaged. The attack on Pearl Harbor had a huge effect on public opinion in the U.S. If the Americans had been officially declared neutral by then in the Second World War, this would have been the case by the next day, and the Americans were now officially part of the Allies. But another important event took place on this day after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, the beginning of the Manhattan Project. Already in 1939, Albert Einstein wrote a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt together with other emigrated scientists. In this letter, he warned about the possibility that Nazi Germany could work on the development of an atomic bomb, and that the development of this technology could probably be decided by war. And after the devastating attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet and the official entry into war, the development of the atomic bomb was now the highest priority. Nevertheless, it should take almost a year for the official work on the Manhattan Project to begin, because first you had to create the right infrastructure, recruit the best scientists, and hire tens of thousands of other workers from engineers to administration personnel. And of course, all of this under the highest secrecy. Robert Oppenheimer, an outstanding theoretical physicist, was eventually appointed to the scientific head of the main lab in Los Alamos, New Mexico. The primary goal was the development of an atomic weapon in front of Germany or another enemy nation. And so the project reached its peak after years of development on July 16, 1945. On this day, the first successful test of an atomic bomb, known as the Trinity test, took place in the desert of New Mexico. This test showed that the concepts and technologies that were developed within the framework of the Manhattan Project were actually functional. The Americans now had the lever to decide on life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. U.S. President Truman was at the time of the test in Potsdam to take part in the Potsdam Conference, a meeting of the Allied leadership to discuss the order of war in Europe. He received the message in the form of a cryptic telegram from War Minister Henry Stimson. The telegram said, "Today morning implemented. Diagnosis not yet completed, but the results seem satisfactory and exceed expectations." And Winston Churchill also found out on the same day of the test's success and noted in his memoirs, "Now this nightmare was over." And at his place came the bright and consoling view that one or two devastating blows could end the war. Stalin, however, was only a week later explained relatively gradually that a new type of bomb had been developed that would break the Japanese will to war. But it is ensured that even he already knew on the day of the successful test by his spy Klaus Fuchs of the production of the U.S. atomic bomb. Because on the same evening he initiated the construction of a Soviet atomic bomb, which had begun in 1943, to accelerate even further. In U.S. circles, however, there was the heated debate about the actual use of the bombs. Supporters claimed that they would lead to immediate capitulation of Japan and thus prevent massive losses on both sides. But opponents claimed they were militarily unnecessary, because with a sea blockade and reinforced conventional bomb attacks, Japan could also lead to unconditional capitulation. To this day, the question of the actual necessity is debated. But for the US government, it was clear that the bomb would be used. But about which Japanese cities should the bombs be dropped? Also here, a heated debate broke out in the circles of the president. While Tokyo was the most obvious goal to leave behind the greatest physical and psychological damage, it quickly got rid of it. There were some reasons for this. On the one hand, Tokyo had already launched intensive bombings before the bombs were dropped, especially during the raging fire in March 1945. This attack already caused enormous destruction and high number of victims. And due to this previous destruction, the additional effect and the power of the atomic bomb on the city was pretty limited. Because the main goal of the atomic bomb drop was to make the force and the devastating effects of the new weapon clear. And to demonstrate the full effect and the destructive power of the bomb, a city that had not been bombed so far was preferred. Because the drop on a city that had been less affected so far should also maximize the surprise effect and the psychological shock effect. But there were also two other reasons. Tokyo was a symbolic and political center as a capital, but the USA wanted to choose targets that also had a significant military or industrial significance. And in addition, there were already considerations as to how it should proceed with Japan after the war. The Japanese capital was to be used as a center for occupation. And the destruction of this capital would have made the occupation policy of the Allies possibly much more complicated. Other goals, such as Kyoto, were also excluded for other reasons. U.S. War Minister Henry L. Stimson personally agreed to erase Kyoto from the list of goals, as he knew the city from previous visits and appreciated its cultural value. And so the choice for the first bomb drop fell on Hiroshima. The city was an important military hub, which had several Japanese army divisions, a communication center, and a camp for military equipment. In addition, the city had been spared from major destruction until then, which fulfilled all important criteria. The choice of the second city, on the other hand, was much more chaotic. Originally, the city of Kokura was intended as the target for the second bomb. However, bad weather conditions, including strong clouds and smoke from the previous bombardment in a nearby city, made it impossible to aim at Kokura. And so the pilot decided to fly to Nagasaki, the secondary target. Nagasaki was known for its shipbuilding industry and played an important role in the production of war material. But the second bomb drop is still debated to this day. Because the drop occurred only 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima, when the Japanese had not yet fully understood the true destruction. Nevertheless, it should still take some time after the drop on Nagasaki until the Japanese actually capitulated completely, which is used as an argument for the second operation by supporters. The Japanese war minister also refused to admit in the 3 days between the drops that the Hiroshima bomb was an atomic bomb. Only after Nagasaki did he tell the cabinet that the Americans apparently had 100 atomic bombs and that the next target could be Tokyo. Interestingly, this false knowledge was based on the torture of the American pilot Marcus Mac Dilder. He said under threat of violence that the Americans had 100 atomic bombs and that Tokyo and Kyoto would be the next atomic bomb targets. Both were of course lies, because Mac Dilder was not even involved in the Manhattan Project and had no idea. He told the Japanese exactly what they wanted to hear in his opinion. But with this lie, he probably brought the Japanese to the final capitulation. What do you think about the drop of the atomic bombs in retrospect? Was it really necessary, or could the war have ended quickly otherwise? Feel free to write it in the comments. Today's video ends here. Thank you all for watching to the end. I hope you enjoyed our content. If you liked this video, we would be happy if you could like it and share the video on your social networks and subscribe to the channel. We have always appreciated your support. Now let's get ready for the next video here on our Wikipedia Plus channel. We'll be back soon. A big hug, and until then, bye!